Hello, 10th graders. This is your lecture over chapter 8, which is entitled Theology. And this is the one that I should have done before Christmas break. But I ended up telling you it's not going to be done. So this is the first day of homework, which is kind of a review, always a good place to start. So before I get into the notes, I will send some housekeeping things. First thing, because this is your assignment for the first day, you do need to print off the notes that I've provided in Google Classroom, and you need to follow along. This topic, theology, is not super hard, but you need to follow along with the notes when you listen to this. Second housekeeping thing, tomorrow starts chapter 9. So this is more of a review, but you need to have it under your belt. Other housekeeping things. First semester is over. So the scores that you have received on all the assignments that you have done for me are permanent for my records, in that you cannot go back and change them. However, your parents give you your final grade for this class. I keep track of what work you do for me so that they have a record of that. And then you guys work that out in the end. They may say, I'm just going to give you what she gave you. That's totally fine. But if there's some variance in what they want to give you and what I've given you, that's a you and them thing. I just keep track of what I assign, when it's turned in, and what score you got on it. So if you have a 0 or zeros from first semester, they will not be changed. Now, they might be able to be changed for your parents. That's up to you guys, not me. But that also means that we are not at odds with each other. If you didn't get something done, you didn't get something done. Does it have ramifications? Yeah. When you don't do something, there's, I hate using the word consequences, but there's going to be ripples from that. Okay. But I don't hate you, and hopefully you don't hate me. And we're just, we're going to continue our learning journey together. So that's all. And for most of this, you might see a couple cats wander in. You'll see the bottom half of my face, probably not my whole face, because you're supposed to be paying attention to the notes as we go through them, not the video. One of these days I'll be super techie. By then you'll probably all have kids, but you know, I'll still be working on it. And this lecture, just because it's the first one, will probably go 45 minutes, or it might be short. I don't know. Sometimes I can get through your lectures faster, but we're not in a hurry. We have time. 45 to 50 minutes is my limit, though. And there's no written homework today, so it's all listening. Woohoo! Okay, here we go. So chapter 8 is entitled Theology. We have made it through all the worldviews. Let's see if I can say all of them. Christianity, Islam, secularism, Marxism, New Spirituality, and Postmodernism. I do believe that's 6. Now we're going to take a look at different areas of study. They sound more like academic areas. The book calls them disciplines, but I think you can just say they're areas of learning, and everybody would participate in these areas of learning by either taking a class or living. You can't not run into these 10 areas. So that's probably why they're called disciplines. So theology is the first one, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So in simplicity, theology is the study of God. And when you hear that, there's almost this, or at least I feel there's this sigh of relief. Okay, I know that. I have beliefs about that. And it's like, okay, there's a sense of familiarity and not new in something where you could just kind of relax and go, okay, yeah, I got this. I'd say take that, feel that way, but also don't turn off your learning side of your brain, okay? Theology answers the questions, how did I get here and how did everyone else get here? These are beginning questions. They are religious questions. And by beginning, you could almost say that twice. They're the beginning questions, because they are beginning questions in the sense that they're religious. They are also beginning questions in the sense that how did everything begin? And we often, as Christians, just go to the book of Genesis and say, ta-da, that's how it all began. So I'm getting ahead of myself, though. Theology, back to it. Study of God and how he relates to the beginning, because that is what theology answers. So, and I have a cat coming, just so you know, don't be afraid. Here's the kicker, though. It's not a kicker, it's just a statement. And sometimes it's like, really? Does that happen? And it's like, yes, it does happen. What's the statement? It's on your notes. It says, our understanding of God enables us to understand everything else. That's Milo. So let's make it personal. My understanding of God enables me to understand everything else. What do you mean? Well, what I believe about God affects what I believe about everything else. And this is probably one of those duh statements, but I'm still amazed that this one thing, it's just the beginning thing. But it is like the first domino that affects all the other dominoes behind it. And granted, a lot of times I get overwhelmed with all the dominoes that are past this domino, and it's like overwhelming, and I go, oh my word, I can't, it's too much, blah, blah, whatever. So it is very simplistic and wonderful to go, let's just look at the first domino. And if we choose to set up the first domino correctly, chances are we're going to head in the right direction, which that is amazingly marvelous about God, that he's like that. He encases, not encases, I don't know what the right word is. He holds the most complex of complexities. Like, he gets it. We live on a revolving sphere in the middle of space. And I can microwave my coffee if it gets cold. And I never fall off. And that's complex. And yet he says, what you believe about me will affect everything past that. And so in a sense, it's like a very small child looking at their parent and going, I trust you. Or they could say, I don't trust you. You know, those are like the two options. trust you. I don't trust you, you know? And to me, that's simple. And I'm always amazed at how God, he does that for his family. Like, he's way smart, like way smarter, and he does that for us. So anyway, I had to be amazed there for a little bit. I'm sorry. Let's carry on. So, 3 choices in theology. Now, this is a little bit more simplistic than it actually is, but for 10th grade, it works. Okay. So, within the study of God, there are really 3 choices. There's either theism, atheism, or pantheism. Theism is the belief in the existence of God. So in other words, you're saying, if you're a theist, you say, I believe there is a God. Okay. If you are an atheist, you believe that there is not a God. So the belief that God does not exist. Now, as we have said before with the worldviews, does he not exist because he's irrelevant? Does he not exist because we killed him? Was there ever a God? Looking at the beginning of things helps humans to form an opinion there based on what has happened. So atheism kind of spreads out the options. And then there's pantheism. This is, we talked about this mostly with New Spirituality. It is the belief that everything in the universe is divine. So everything is God. The leaf, the tree, the rock, the water in your dishwasher. It usually is natural things, like your dishwasher itself is not usually given divinity because it was created. But we're not going to parse things there. So those are usually the 3 choices in how, in theology as far as God. Now, things that I didn't write down just yet, but I have to bring up. There are different types of theology. So I got a little wigged out when I was doing some more research because I'm like, theology, it's just the study of God. How can that be complicated? But apparently it is. So there's biblical theology. There's systematic theology. There's another one I can't remember. And then there's practical theology. Now, all of them relate to God, and all of them work together and are based on that biblical theology. That's where it starts. But I'm like, oh my word, can we make this more complicated? But we don't have to talk about those. For right now, when we talk about theology, it is just, that's the study of God. And yes, it includes biblical theology, systematic theology, that one that I can't remember, and practical theology. But we're talking about, so if you believe in God, what are the options? Well, either you do believe in God, that's theism. You don't believe in God, that's atheism, and has fingers as like, well, is he irrelevant? Did we kill him, or was there never one? Or everything's God. And I did draw the line at created things like dishwashers and dryers. Those aren't really God. We would say like heat and light, but then, we can produce heat. So is it, I don't know, but everything is God. We'll just go with everything. So let's go to another statement to try and get back on track with theology. And this is on your notes. So if God does not exist, so if for atheism, he does not exist, there's not a God. If God does not exist, theology is a waste of time. Okay? And we go, well, if there's no God, why study it? Fair. If God does exist, though, So theism or pantheism. If God does exist, everything else is a waste of time if it does not take theology into account. So this beginning domino is a pretty big domino. Because what we're saying is, okay, if God doesn't exist, then why study him? And you'd go, fair. But if he does exist, everything else is affected by him. Sometimes I like either or. It's either this way or that way, because it makes the choices for answers easier in my mind. I don't know if it really is, but you can be overwhelmed by that if you think about it, or maybe it's just me. I don't know. I tend to think too much. But anyway, let's go on. What is the battle? Because this seems pretty open and shut case. Well, society is trying to replace theology. So get that. They're trying to replace the study of God with philosophy. And we learned in the first or second lecture that philosophy is the study of knowledge, truth, and the nature of ultimate reality. So what is really real? Nothing wrong with philosophy, but it is not theology. By saying, by deciding on which side of the fence you are with theology, you are at least acknowledging divinity and God. So therefore, you have to take into account everything that you see, general revelation. And the stakes are high. But if you can replace theology, just take God out of it, then you do not have to take into account general revelation. So, big domino. Okay, so that's just the introduction to theology. What do we know? Let's take a look at some general revelation. Let's look at nature. I'm going to whip off some big words. I can say them. I don't always get completely what they mean, but I have a fairly good idea that can at least allow me to talk to you about this. So what are some evidences from general revelation that lend themselves to the study of God? Well, your book brought up 3. The second law of thermodynamics, genetic information, and what's known as the anthropic principle. Now, these would apply to the study of God if you believed in theism or if you were pantheist. Now, what in the world is the second law of thermodynamics? It is a scientific law that states that the amount of usable energy in a closed system will decrease over time. In other words, although the total energy in the cosmos remains constant, the amount of energy available to do useful work is always getting smaller. And the second law of thermodynamics assumes that the universe is a closed system because there is nothing outside of it. The amount of useful energy is decreasing. Therefore, there must have been a time when the energy clock began ticking. So, this second law of thermodynamics is all about energy. The universe is what they call a closed system because we're not being fed energy from anywhere else, and the amount of usable energy is getting smaller. So all of that means that there had to be a beginning. Now, I don't know who keeps records on the usable amount of energy. People much smarter than I. But I'm going to believe them for right now because I have no reason not to. But because, so in general, think of it as a bank account. Your bank account, because you keep taking things out of it, gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But the truth that you get from that is, well, somebody had to put money into the bank account at the very beginning and open it up so that I could take the money out. So that's really what they're saying in forms of energy, because I can take stuff out, or the energy is getting smaller, usable energy is getting smaller and smaller. There had to be a beginning when it all started. Okay? That's second law of thermodynamics that comes from general revelation. The other thing is genetic information. This one's a little bit easier to explain. We know about the double helix, the DNA. We can look at chromosomes. When you guys get to the point where you're married and you're going to have kids, or even now, I'm sure you've seen ultrasounds, and those are just pictures. That's not actually written out genetic information, but you can trace the genes in your body to genes that are similar to those. And the fact that we can do that, or there's a similarity, there's something about all humans that says they're human, that consistency says that had to be created. Somebody did that on purpose, you know. Now, let's just, I'm going to park here for a second. Let's just be awed and amazed over a gross subject. Okay, so I apologize, but my husband and I have been watching these ear cleaning videos, which I know is really weird, but oh well. And it is amazing to watch people get wax taken out of their ears, and it's all gross and ooey and gooey or hard, but I was actually listening while I was watching, and also seeing the eardrum. That is fascinating. But I was listening to the doctor as he was narrating over this procedure, and he said it several times, so it's just thing. But we all have hairs in our ears, and they actually move horizontally to move the wax from the inner part of your ear to the outer part of your ear. They move horizontally. And if you think about this, wax is probably going to weigh more than your ear. And it is migrating from the inner ear to the outer ear by this horizontal movement. So think of people in a bucket line where they're handing a bucket from them to the next person, and it's all horizontal, so it's all out in front of you. When you have something that is heavier than the ear, it tends to be more vertical. Like if it's heavier, it's going to make the hair bend down. But that hair, as God has created it, is able to take the wax and move it to the next hair. Now, it might be a very minuscule distance, but the fact that it is not weighed down by the wax, but moves horizontally, the fact that it moves is just amazing. Like, I would love to see a slow time-lapse picture of what that looks like. Just watch. It's like watching a flower bloom. Like, you know that the petals open, but it's like you want to be there for the second that it happens to just be amazed. I don't know. All that from earwax. Who knew? Okay. And then there is the anthropic principle. I'm going to read that to you because it is just really easier to understand if I read it to you. So, the anthropic principle is the theory that the universe contains all the necessary properties that make the existence of intelligent life inevitable. It also says we, humans, can observe the universe only because it exists in a way that allows us as observers to exist. So the anthropic principle, anthropology is about the study of man, is really about the universe exists and we are part of the universe and we were actually put here as observers. And when you think of Genesis kind of in that way, so God is okay, bye. Interruption. Welcome to my house. So let's go back to Genesis and let's think, and God is speaking and things are being created. And then he creates animals, and animals observe as well, but they can't communicate necessarily to each other in, how would you say that? I believe they are communicating to each other, but they're kind of limited. Because a herd will communicate to the others around it if there's danger. Like, I don't know how animals communicate. We know some things. And then God creates man. And man has eyes to see everything that God has created. He also has understanding and language. And therefore, he can say what he sees. And that was also part of God's plan. Man was a testifier. And you could go, well, yeah, duh. And I agree, it is a yeah, duh thing, but sometimes I like to be overwhelmed by what God has done and see it from a different perspective. If you're not overwhelmed at it, it's okay. Okay, so those are evidences from general revelation that there is a God. The other options for the atheist are spontaneous generation and what's known as panspermia. Spontaneous generation, I'm sure a lot of you have heard that, is just that one time because everything was just right, that life just exploded. All of a sudden it was spontaneous. It answers some questions, but you still go, or you still say, well, how did that stuff get there? You know, somebody had to put it there for life to just happen. So it is not the best, it's not the best reasoning against God, because it leads you to more questions. But I think that says more about God than that says about man. And then there is this thing known as panspermia. It is the belief that life exists throughout the universe and has been dispersed by interstellar bodies such as asteroids, meteoroids, and comets. And you might as well just add aliens in there. Panspermia is life from other things that are not alive. But once again, it's a great fairy tale story thing. Like if you've ever seen, I think is it The Good Dinosaur? I really love that movie, by the way. I'm sorry. They start with this meteor crash. I might be confusing it with another movie, because humans don't talk, but the dinosaurs do. But you have these meteors that are floating around, not really consistently, but one rocks the line and it comes to Earth, and there's this big explosion, and maybe that's why the dinosaurs talk and the humans don't. I don't know. But that's the general idea. Once again, we're still left, well, how'd the meteors, how'd they get there? And as I said before, I think that's a testament more to God than it is to man, because when people try to find out, like they're searching, he does make himself visible. Sometimes it's just in a question, but he wants to be found. So, I think that's just a testimony to how big he is, which makes, the study of theology all the more amazing. And yeah, it's a big domino. Okay, let's move on. So that's general revelation. Evidences from special revelation. Remember, special revelation is all contained in the Bible, in what God and Jesus and all of those authors said. In Hebrews 1, 10 and 11, we find that God is powerful. It says, in the beginning, Lord, you laid the foundation of the earth and made the heavens with your hands. They will perish, but you remain forever. The Bible also says that God is self-determining and sovereign. In other words, he has a will that will be done, and he doesn't need anything to be alive. So from Daniel 4, 34 and 35, this is Nebuchadnezzar talking. After this time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, looked up to heaven. My sanity returned, and I praised and worshiped the Most High. His rule is everlasting, and his kingdom is eternal. All the peoples of the earth are nothing compared to him. He does as he pleases among the angels of heaven and among the people of earth. No one can stop him or say to him, what have you done? I don't know if you remember, but Nebuchadnezzar, I think it was for about 9 months, he was a king, very big king, and he he challenged God, and he said that he was God. And God said to him, you are not, and because you have said this, I am going to cause a transformation to come upon you, and you're going to eat grass from the earth. Your nails are going to grow long, and you're going to act like a wild animal. But my servant will pray for you, and at the end of this time, you'll know that I am God. And so it happened. You can look in the book of Daniel, and you can read about it. And that's pretty amazing. Also, in the Bible, God is holy. Leviticus 11:44. For I am the Lord your God. You must consecrate yourselves and be holy, because I am holy. God is patient. 2 Peter 3:9. The Lord isn't really being slow about his promises, as some people think. No, he is being patient for your sake. He doesn't want anyone to be destroyed, but wants everyone to repent. The fifth thing that we can find in the Bible is that God is love. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Now, when we find out these things about God in the Bible, there's a situation or some realizations that come to mind. So, because God is holy, he can be the judge of sin and not sin. Because God is holy and his will is sovereign, then his very existence serves to condemn us, because he's holy and we're not. Because God is love, he can be the Redeemer. Remember, he sent his only Son. And we find out that God's love is universal. He loves all people equally. In fact, he created all people. Also, God's love is gracious. He loves sinners when they hate him. God's love is sacrificial. He gave his only Son for a permanent payment. And God's love is beneficial. His love benefits those who receive him for all eternity. This is the God that we're talking about. This is the one that we are studying. Big domino. I think I'm just going to say that over and over again. Now, that's a short lecture on theology and God. The Christian God, to be exact. Okay? Now, how do the worldviews compare on this? Well, Christianity obviously believes in theism. The theism, the God that they believe in, is one God in three distinct divine forms. We call this the Trinity. God is holy, so he can be the judge, and he is also love, so he can be the Redeemer. So he wrote the story. It is his story. And in this story, because he's perfect, he can judge everyone and everything. And because he is love, he can redeem who he chooses to redeem. Okay, now, Islam. They also believe in theism. They believe in God. Their God is named Allah. They, however, are what we would call monotheists. They believe in only one God, not one God in three forms, just one God, and his name is Allah. And to know that God, you must be familiar with what the Quran says about him, and then you would look at his actions. And some of the divine books include the Psalms and Proverbs, I believe. But just remember that within Islam, Muhammad was the most prestigious prophet. And by prestigious, he was the one who got the words of Allah to write the Quran. Only him. Everybody else was not as, I don't want to say important, but really not as important as what Muhammad did. So if you really wanted to know Allah, the simplest way would be to know the Quran, because within the Quran is this information about Allah, who is one God. So they are theists. They do believe in theism. It's just not the same God as the God of Christianity. And then there is secularism. They are not theists. They believe in atheism, because there is, according to them, nothing higher than human life. It's not that they don't see the second law of thermodynamics. It's not that they don't see genetic information or the anthropic principle. It's not that they don't see general revelation. It's not that they don't see it, and it's not that they cannot read the Bible. It's that they choose to not believe in what is there, or believe it to the point that it supports their view, which is there is nothing higher than human life. So what they do mostly is to make fun of those who do believe in God and question their intelligence. So by putting others down, it diverts attention away from God. It diverts attention. It doesn't answer questions. It belittles. It distracts. And so then it is more about the human being the highest form of life, because they're able to manipulate other humans. Marxism is the love child of of secularism. It's really not, but it was the obvious. I was trying to think what was the correlation. It is the obvious next step, so it's not the love child. Sorry. Postmodernism, that was the love child between secularism and Marxism, or whatever that video said. See, I'm starting to remember things. Okay, sorry, this is haphazard. I need to get through this. We're on Marxism. They are also atheists, but for them, God cannot exist. It's not just that he doesn't, but he can't. Because if there's a God, that negates any form of revolution, because God is love. You don't revolt and kill people if you serve a God of love. And yes, you have to define love. That doesn't mean that there isn't judgment, but the two just cannot exist together. There can't be Marxist Christians. It is an oxymoron. And then we move on. The other worldview that we had was New Spirituality. They believe in pantheism, where everything is God. Remember, the universe is divine. In this case, God, and your definition of him, he's ambiguous, not really personal, and not purposeful. There are a lot of beneficial things that happen when you can connect with the universe, with God in that way, but you have to figure it out on your own. There's no direction for it. So they believe in pantheism. And then there is the worldview postmodernism. Once again, they believe in atheism. There is no God. What they say is that God is a social construct used to manipulate others. So their God is something that we have made up to manipulate people. Reality is a locked door, so there's no way to know. And they're atheists to the point, I think they try and play their card. Instead of just saying there is no God, it's more about, well, there's no way to know if there really is a God, so therefore there is no God. And that adds another finger to atheism, where I said, okay, there is no God, like he doesn't exist, he's irrelevant, or we killed him. And they add a fourth prong to that, where like, well, we're finite creatures, there's no way we can know about God because we're not divine, so therefore if you can't know, you can't really say. So we can't be saying that we know God when we don't know God. But my question with that would be, well, what if you had a book that said it was from God? And then the postmodernists would just question everything. Like, well, how do you know that's from God? Like, how do you know it's not from God? Say, I think I would be good for one question, and that's about it. But even postmodernism is not going to make sense. And here's the problem. Or here's not the problem. Here's one of my problems. I've been a Christian for over 30 years. Over 40 years. Ooh. Been a Christian for over 40 years. So it is hard for me to even think without the realm of God. I can't do it. I don't know how. I mean, I can try in little bits, but it always seems like when you say there is no God in any way, form, or shape, it's like you're just saying that because you want that to be true, but that doesn't mean that it's true. So I can't always think real well about atheists. They could probably discuss me into the ground. I am too simple. But to me, it kind of seems like a cop-out. Now, that doesn't mean that we call them coppers outers. I don't think so. Cop-outers. It doesn't mean that we say that. We need to respect them, but we also need to be courageous and willing to be courageous and say, what makes you think that way? What evidence do you see? Which should be a benign question. What makes you think that way? And it needs to be said in a benign way, because really, you're just trying to find out what they believe. So, I was also going to share that those are all the notes, and I am at 47 minutes, so I need to talk really quickly. I listened to Proverbs a lot over vacation, and I read too, but sometimes it's just really nice to listen to it. And in Proverbs 28, it's a good proverb, but about verse 14, it says, happy is the one who is always reverent. And reverent here means a profound respect of God. But the one who hardens his heart falls into trouble. And I just thought, wow, happy is the one who is always reverent, who has a profound respect of God. And the first way that you respect God is by admitting that he is real. Just neat. And I think that should do it. Tomorrow you're going to start chapter 9, as I already said. The rest of our course is going to be about comparing the worldviews based on these academic areas, also known as disciplines, that everybody comes into contact with. And the first one is theology. Things that you need to remember. All 6 worldviews have different ideas, even though theology is just, I put that in quotes, just the study of God. And they have different definitions for God, and that's when it gets a little bit confusing. So anyway, I will see you Friday. Bye.